So it is time for this week's difficult conversation. Today I'm discussing a rare and very painful skin condition called Epidermolysis Bullosa, or EB. Now, it causes the skin to blister and tear at even the slightest touch, earning it the nickname butterfly skin. And people living with EB are often left in constant pain, and in severe cases, it can even be fatal. Now, due to the rarity of the condition, very little funding is allocated to research, leaving people with EB to suffer without any effective treatment options. But despite the challenges of living with this, Lucy Beall Lott is an advocate for EB awareness and has urged social media and her modelling career to share her experiences and raise awareness about the condition. And she's continuously inspiring many with her positive attitude and advocacy efforts. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined in the studio by model and advocate Lucy Beall Lott, the CEO of DEBRA, Tony Byrne. So, Lucy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It means a lot.
Yeah, well, so talk to me about this condition then, and how do we say it correctly? Because I'm hoping that I got it right.
So there are many subtypes of EB, but I have recessive dystrophic epidermolysis bullosa, or RDEB for short. It is considered a very severe subtype of EB, and it affects everything. It affects not only my top layer of skin, but it also affects every internal surface as well. So my mouth, my eyes, my throat, everything. A lot of people think it's just a skin condition, but it's a lot more.
So what does that mean then to you? I mean, how does it affect you? You say it affects everything, so your organs, your skin, things that people can't see. But what does it do to those things?
It can make a lot of things very difficult. I never really knew I was different growing up until I had my first surgery whenever I was 12. It was for my throat. Scar tissue over time does not stretch, it contracts. And this includes the internal scar tissue. So whenever I was 12, my throat closed and I needed to have emergency surgery to open it back up. And I remember whenever they put the oxygen mask on me as they put me to sleep for the surgery, and I remember thinking, oh, this might not just make things difficult, it might make things ultimately impossible. And that was the first time I really felt the weight of my condition.
So did you have it from birth, and were they aware of it from birth?
It is a genetic condition.
Right.
I was very lucky that the hospital I was born at in Texas was aware of EB and had seen it before. And I was very quickly diagnosed visually and then diagnosed genetically a little bit later on.
So visually, then, how did you differ to the other babies? How did you come out differently?
So I'm the youngest child of 3, and so my mom knew what was normal newborn skin and what wasn't. And I was born with my entire right thumb was a blister, and she knew that that wasn't quite right. But what really was an indicator of something being wrong was whenever they removed one of the monitoring panels on me and it tore off all my skin, and my mom knew there was something very seriously wrong.
Wow. Now, Tony, talk to me about this condition then. So for somebody who doesn't fully understand, because I can understand, obviously, this is a very painful and difficult thing to live with, but for somebody who doesn't understand, how does it sort of, what is the technicality of what's happening to the person who's suffering with this?
So it depends on the severity of the condition of EB. But in its mildest form, if you can call EB mild, they may not be able to walk.
OK.
They may not be able to walk down the street because their gait changes because of the blistering on their feet, and any sort of friction will come up when blistering. The worse it becomes whether they have to go into wheelchairs, eye scarring. This condition is debilitating. They have to have bandages, which may take 3 hours a day to put on. They have to have a regime of drugs, which is painkillers and inflammation drugs. And the mental health aspect is enormous because sometimes they just will not go out of the house because of the concern they have about being touched or hit that will affect their skin. So this difficult subject of EB is what DEBRA is set up to do. We were the first global patient organisation set up in 1978. And what our task is to do, if you look at it in 2 buckets, one is that today we have a community support team that will go in to a hospital when the child is born and help the family through that difficult, your child has EB, through their journey of life, how they progress into school, how they educate teachers, governors, parents, students, and they take them through the secondary school, college, into relationships. But it is about emotional support, financial support and guidance and practical tips. It is there as the first thing on the mental health element, as we are the first person they talk to. In terms of tomorrow, though, we look at research. So we don't get government funding. Our funding comes from donors, trusts, And we've got over 100 shops throughout the UK. And this actually generates money for us to support community support teams. We have holiday homes and then in for research. And in terms of tomorrow, we've launched this year a £5 million appeal to try and get 3 million for drug repurposing. So at the moment, Lucy has no drug that is for her. To get a new drug onto the market takes 15 to 20 years, and it could cost about $100 million because for every one drug, 99 fails. In the NHS today, there are drugs for psoriasis and eczema, for example, about 20 drugs, that have already gone through their safety profiles and are in use. We've talked to the top dermatologists in the UK and EB specialists, and they believe if these drugs were used for the EB community, it will help their quality of life. But to do that, you need £500,000 in a clinical trial.
So you're raising funds for that.
Raising funds for that.
So, Lucy, basically what happens is that if somebody touches you or you have some surgery or something, that skin will blister.
Yes.
And become very difficult to manage and deal with.
EB exists on a spectrum, so I'm very lucky in that my skin does have some resistance to friction. Whenever I was growing up in Texas, I did things like horseback ride.
Oh, wow.
If the social benefit of doing the activity outweighed the risk of me getting hurt, my mom let me do it. But once skin does blister, you run the risk of the skin becoming fragile in that area forever. So for me, my most fragile areas are the areas that saw an increase in friction as a child whenever I was, say, learning how to crawl. So my knees, my feet, my hands and my elbows are my worst affected areas.
And how do you cope with it on a day-to-day basis then? What is your regime when you get up? Do you have to take a load of drugs? What's the deal?
It absolutely depends on the day. You have to take each day as it comes with this, which helps you gain perspective because some days can be really good, but other times my day will start hours before my peers do because I need to dress my wounds before I leave the house. I'm not on any painkillers at the moment, but if that were part of my regime, I would have to make sure that I was properly medicated before I did an activity that I knew would cause me pain. So it just absolutely depends on the day, which is for a lot of people why this condition is so mentally challenging, because you cannot prepare for the future. You just have to take it, not even every day, every minute, every hour. It can change. You can experience joy, pain, fear, love in the same hour.
And how do you cope mentally and also with your relationships with people? And I mean, because that must be very, very hard.
Yeah, so I credit my mother to a lot of my mindset. She and my siblings, absolutely, they never treated me like there was anything wrong with me. So whenever I was growing up, I didn't think there was anything at all wrong with me. I had a lot of different comments about my skin as I was growing up, but I knew that it came from a place of ignorance and not something malicious. But whenever I was 17, I was living in Texas still, and I was picking up my dog from the vet, and I wore shorts so you could see the scars on my knees. And at the vet's office, a woman I had never met before looked at me and said, "You look like you've been mauled by a gorilla. What happened to you?" And I had experienced this kind of negativity before in my life, but there's something about that experience that was just much different. So I remember taking my dog, putting him in my lap, and calling my mom from the car and just sobbing and saying, "I can't, this is too much." And my mom said, "You know what, you need to write about it. You need to write about this. People need to understand what you were going through." So I did. But then I quickly understood that even though my words were powerful and they could, carry me across oceans, seeing it is an entirely different thing. I could put my images of my scars and my body with this writing, and people might understand a very small glimpse of what people with EB go through. So I did begin modeling as a means of raising awareness alongside my education. But I also really quickly found out, as a young child being sick all the time, that my mind was a lot more powerful than my body. And I decided from a very young age to let that take me as far as it could. And I got accepted to my first PhD program 2 days ago.
That's amazing, isn't it? And
yeah.
What were you studying?
I'm a medievalist. I study medieval English art.
Wow. Very, very impressive.
Thank
and
you.
so what are you hoping to do now, moving forward? How do you want to progress it? So you're going to study medieval art?
Yeah.
Where do you want that to take you?
I would love to teach. I would love to work in a museum or heritage studies or anything like that. But most of all, I just want people to be able to Google EB and have hope. I was born in 1998, and my mom could not Google it and see anything happy. She was just told that I was going to die young and have a horrible, painful life up until that moment. And I had to become my own role model. Every child deserves to grow up seeing someone who looks like them doing things that they want to do. So I hope the more that we talk about it, the more people can understand that there is hope.
Well, listen, it's been such a pleasure to meet you both. If people want to find out more about EB for them to support your cause, do you have a website?
We do. So if you go onto our website, which is DEBRA, DEBRA.org.uk, and it's got a lot of information. And I'd ask people to be aware of EB. They can either donate or volunteer or talk about the condition, and they might know someone else who can actually help and assist us. But if you go to our website, we've got all the information there. Thank you.
Remind me again of the web address.
Website is debra.org.uk, and that is DEBRA, DEBRA.
Well, listen, thank you so much. It's really good to talk to you. Lucy, what an inspiration. What a brilliant woman.
She's fantastic.
Isn't she brilliant? Listen, Lucy, thank you so much for joining me. And
thank you
so much to you.
Thank you.
Of course, Lucy Beall, Lott model and advocate, and also Tony Byrne. He's the CEO of DEBRA.